All right, it's the weekend wrap up. We are back. Michaela May. This was a weekend of rematches, Nebs. Michaela Mayer getting a more, I would say, dominant win in the rematch with Sandy Ryan. William Zepeda getting a more dominant win in his win over Tevin Farmer. Maybe dominant's the wrong word. More clear cut wins in their rematches. I've been thinking about this, bro. It's starting to feel like Michaela Mayer is working on being like a pound for pound, not just pound for pound, a Hall of Fame type of talent for her era. When I think about this era of women's boxing, she's one of about 10 names that I think has really left her imprint. And now she's moving up in weight, beating younger champions, getting better in rematches with those younger champions. It's been a really impressive run for Michaela, and this was one of the best performances I can remember her having.
Be honest with you, I don't know if I'll go that far. I think she's at the back end of these girls that are having this run right now in women's boxing. Women's boxing right now is having a hell of a renaissance, right? They've got a much larger pool of talent than they've ever had, in recent years. Even in the heydays of the Layla Ali's and Christy Martins and all that, they had one or two superstars, and then everybody else was just kind of trash. So I think now it's getting the pool is getting way deeper. But to speak directly to Michaela Mayer, I think obviously the first fight between her and Sandy Ryan was a classic, almost, right. You talking about that was an all out fight. This one, I don't know what happened to Sandy Ryan. Like, I don't know if it was that Michaela Mayer was so much better than her this time around, or was Sandy Ryan a lot more in her head than she was the first time. Like, it seemed like this time, whereas before Sandy Ryan was getting off punches left and right, she was in the fight. She didn't seem like she wanted to be there this time. This
Well,
time around.
I think some of that was like she would say things in the buildup like, I was too reckless. I need to be more calculated. And she would say certain things like that to where it just felt like, she wasn't letting the offense go as freely because she was thinking more. And maybe she got hit less because of that. But at the end of the day, I think it let Michaela, really get into a rhythm, establish that jab, establish her distance. And then on the inside was just slicker, had more of an arsenal, had different combinations she could throw. And, like Michaela said in the buildup at one point, she was like, every time I look at Sandy, it looks like she's about to cry. Like some of us are not built for that. And I'm not gonna go that far personally, but there's
Yeah.
something about Sandy's mental where she has a hard time controlling her emotions in the heat of the moment. And Michaela's just kind of a pro's pro, like, nah, I've been here before. Even if you beat me, I'm gonna come back. There's a confidence to
Yeah.
her that only elite fighters have.
Look, Michaela Mayer is exactly what you just said. She's a pro's pro. So she's a very professional fighter. Do I think she's the best at any weight class or pound for pound list? No. I think she'll make the pound for pound list just on her name alone and what she's done in the sport so far. But again, I think she's on the short end of the stick of the talent pool in the pound for pound list that we have right now in women's boxing. I think she makes the list just basically off of who she's beaten so far. But I'll tell you what, if I'm Sandy Ryan or in Sandy Ryan's team, I'm saying let's go back to being who we were that got us here, because this whole methodical trying to be, you know, a pure boxer type shit doesn't work. Not for her, right? The Sandy Ryan we got that first fight. That's what everybody was tuning in to watch, right? This second time
There's the
around,
expectation that she's
yeah,
gonna impose her physicality at some point, and that
because
wasn't.
I thought she did. I thought that was a very close fight. If not, I think you could have given that to her, right? The first fight, because I thought she was landing the cleaner, harder punches. I think Michaela landed more, but when you looked at what Sandy Ryan was landing, even in this fight, right? Even in this fight where she didn't throw as much, when she did land, it gave Michaela pause. Like, hold on, you know what I'm saying? And I think if she'd have just did more, if she'd have done just a little bit more, she wins this fight going down. But as it is, because she for some reason sat back and did the whole watch me thing, she got her ass handed to her, at least on the scorecards. I don't think she was ever in any trouble being stopped. I don't think she was ever, seriously hurt. She might have got buzzed, a time or two, but nothing where you're like, oh my god. But I don't think she did enough to Michaela, just because she was just sitting around. It just
I,
seemed
I
like,
I thought it was a boxing lesson, to be honest. I thought maybe she won 2 or 3 rounds. I could have been 9-1. It felt like it was a very clear cut win for Michaela. And I get everything you're saying
yeah,
about Sandy, but
I had it 8-2. Yeah, I had it 8-2.
yeah, and I get everything you're saying about Sandy, but at the end of the day, when the older fighter is the older fighter and the fighter who started as a featherweight is the one who makes the adjustment, who throws the better combinations. That's what's so impressive to me. It's not just her fighting and the way she's winning, it's also the context of being much naturally smaller, really sitting down on her shots and getting Sandy's respect. Even if Michaela's not a big puncher, I think she had her respect, with her power. And I think the context of how she's moving up in weight and doing her thing, I think it's been a very impressive run. And you know, if anyone has more upside just on age, right, between the two of them, it would be Sandy. So you would assume, oh, she's gonna like Bivol and better Bev. Okay, Bivol is the one that makes the better adjustments, but Michaela was the one who did it on this one.
Hats off to Michaela. She got like you said, a very clear cut decision. This wasn't. There was no guesswork. Um, there was no. Well, maybe. Nah, it was none of that shit. This is a very clear cut win. So again, very impressive for her. It's going to do big things for her career. I think Sandy Ryan blew the pooch. If that was her game plan, or maybe it was just that Michaela was that much better than her that night. This is all speculative, but based on what we saw, I don't need to see it again. Michaela was clear cut winner this time, and I I hope that they now take advantage of that and get Michaela into some bigger name fights or unification fights. I think the Jesus Sim, I think you're completely right. I think Mayer versus Price is the obvious choice. Price has all the other belts, and she's earned them. So but I think Price is a problem. I think people who don't know who she is, I watched that Jonas fight. Price is a problem, bro.
Yeah, I didn't see that fight, but I saw her a while ago. Admittedly, like her style and her approach is not like right in the front of my mind.
Hmm.
But I know that Natasha Jonas is the real deal. She's been, tit for tat with every other great that she's ever been in there. Beat Michaela wasn't the best decision, but has that win. So that says a lot about Lauren Price. That's a fight that I would love to see. Somebody who has a hard time getting fights, just 7 pounds lower, is Chantel Cameron. And I would have no problem seeing Chantal move up in weight. If she can't get a third fight with Katie, which it doesn't look like that's going to happen at least anytime soon, especially if Amanda beats her in the third one, which is very possible. But I think a
You
fight
mean like she
between
did the previous two times? Okay, I just want
listen, they're both close fights, and that's why I say I think it's very possible Amanda wins the third one, and then there's no reason I think that Katie would do a third fight with Chantal. If she beats Amanda the third fight, I think that's possible, but I think a fight between Chantal Cameron and Michaela Mayer would be a hell of a fight.
look, and I'm not trying to get off topic, but you could very easily say that Katie Taylor has at least 5 losses in her career. I think she lost both the Chantel Cameron fights. I don't think that's even debatable for me. I don't know why I don't know how she got that second fight. I thought it was clear that Chantel won both fights. I thought the first fight with Amanda, I thought was clear that Amanda won. I thought the second one was closer. I'll give people that, especially with the cut that Amanda got. I still think she won the fight. Um, and to be honest with you, I think that um, Katie split the Pursoon fights. I think she got a gift the first time around, and I
Well, and
and
then watch the Natasha Jonas fight back. That's another flip a coin joint.
right. So I get why people love Katie Taylor, but I think she's got at least 5 losses on her ledger. And if you were being objective, I think she got. But that
But that being
aside,
said, if Katie Taylor was 19-5, she'd still be a great fighter. You know what I
right,
mean?
right. With that being said, I think, and I said all that to say, Chantel Cameron wipes the floor with Michaela Mayer. And the reason I say that is because she's beaten the much better and it's been convincing, bro. She didn't lose that Katie Taylor fight. I'm here to say it.
I
She
agree.
won that fight and it got taken away from her. Michaela Mayer has lost fights. You feel me? She's lost fights that she's won technically. You know what I'm saying? Chantel Cameron is a winner, bro, and she's beating these girls, and it's convincing. It's just like with Clarissa Shields, right? There's really maybe one or two fights you can kind of say the other girl kind of gave, Clarissa some problems. Same thing with I think Chantel Cameron is in that club. I think Chantel Cameron, to be honest with you, for me, she's probably I mean, just because Katie Taylor did get the wins, I'll have her fourth in my pound for pound. I'm probably telling too much because we're going to do the rankings. And Jesus Sim, you can find the women's rankings on our website there, ITR.
We have a
Uh,
pound for pound ranking, Jesus, but we have the rankings of all the sanctioning bodies for the men on our site. One of us should really go ahead and just do the female ones as well. If you're
yeah,
looking for sanctioning body rankings for the women, just go to the sanctioning body site. They have male and female rankings. You can get the most updated version of what their rankings are, or BoxRec if you're looking for just a general.
I'll probably be doing that this next weekend. Our first like rankings of the season because the first quarter's coming to a wrap.
Well, I love the way how you said it with your chest that you think that Chantal would win that fight. I think it's a 50-50. That's why I want to see it. Um, there was a lot of really good performances on this undercard. Shushu Carrington with a really
Mhm.
great performance. It felt like Tiger Johnson turned the corner on this one, moving up to welterweight. It just looked like his legs were up under him. What were some of the other? Emiliano Vargas had a tremendous performance as well. Um,
That boy is going to be a problem. Of the three brothers, and don't get me wrong, all three of them can fight, but Emiliano, goodness, bro.
there's some star power there. There's
We,
no doubt.
and you know it when you see it, right? Like when you see the goods, okay, and he's doing what you're supposed to be doing at this level. You know what I'm saying? He's not bullshitting. He's not wasting any time. He's getting to work on these fellas. And hey, he's got a really decent chin too, by the way, because when he has been caught clean, he's walked through that shit. So I'm telling you, bro, Emiliano Vargas. I'm not saying the other two brothers can't make some waves or do something and be decent fighters, but Emiliano is he's the one.
Nibs, do you think Emiliano is still a prospect at this point? He's super young, but in terms of his development, what's your
He's not
take
even
on that?
21 yet. He's not even 21 yet. That's the thing that gets you right. He's not even 21 yet. I think that technically, yes. I think talent wise, he could be a contender already. But I think where you put him at where he's at in his career, yeah, he's still a prospect. He hasn't beaten anybody for me yet for me to say, okay, he's a contender right now. I think he's still a prospect at this point. But I think he's a fight or two away from being a serious contender.
Speak on Brian Norman for a minute because he had a fantastic knockout. Again, so easy to forget how young he is with how long we've been watching him at the world class level. 23 years old. I would have said he was more like 30. But he's a
Mhm.
23-year-old veteran. I still have questions about some of the reliability, maybe is the word I'm looking for. But give me your take on Brian Norman Jr., where you see him at welterweight right now.
First off, hats off to him, not because of the knockout, but because of his recovery in that first round from those punches. Because he got caught clean a couple of times where he was doing a chicken dance. You know what I'm saying? A
Mhm.
little bit, and his recovery was quick. Like
He can be hit. That's kind of my biggest concern about him.
his defense is wanting. You know what I mean? But at the same time, his recovery to me, because let's be really clear, he was fighting a real guy. This wasn't some bum that he's coming back from. And for those who haven't seen the pictures online or seen the story, that hand injury was real. His left hand surgery was serious. So to be able to come back and was throwing that hand like it like there was never an issue to begin with. Again, hats off to him for that. The knockout was just beautiful. Like the setup of it, the placement of his punches. I think what's underrated and what most people who are just general fans don't catch is the placement of the punches. They just think, knockout punches, they think, oh, that's great. But when you look at where he's placing those punches and when the timing of the punches, look, I think Brian Norman, the sky is the limit for him. If he tightens up that defense, right, he could be a serious problem. The problem is those other three guys with belts at welterweight. If your defense is that suspect, they're going to take advantage of that, right? No matter who he gets in with, all three of those title holders can expose that defense. You know what I mean? And none of those guys are easy pickings. You know what I'm saying? They're champs. They're legitimate champions, is what I'm saying. There's
Yep.
no low hanging fruit. Mario Barrios, a lot of people think is the low hanging fruit, but Barrios's boxing skills are probably the best out of the three, like pure
He's the
boxing
most
skills.
proven guy at welterweight for
Right.
sure.
And he's got chops. He's already proven that, right? He's got a
Yeah.
chin. I mean, yeah, he got knocked out by Tank, but everybody gets knocked out by Tank. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at what he's done, I think even against Mario Barrios, and Mario Barrios has proven he can take advantage of those defensive flaws like nobody's business. So I think he's got to. I think people are going to want him to go in against Barrios first because they think that's the easiest of the three. But I think the fight, everybody is everybody wants it welterweight. We know what that is. But I think that he's got to tighten up that defense. But I'm telling you, his placement and his offense, it's a problem, bro. It's a serious problem. And I think for his first fight back from a serious injury, hats
My,
off
my
to him,
my
man.
thing with him is he's already right. He's 23. He's already at the championship level. He's at a level where it's not that you stop developing, but you're supposed to be hitting your peak. And in some ways, he already like he's an incredible puncher. He's very accurate. All the things that you were saying, but there's also he does get hit a lot. He's had entire fights where he looks very lost and vulnerable. And so I just wonder like is he ahead of his own development in a sense? Like
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
a if he wasn't because for a 23-year-old guy, he's already so ahead of the curve that it's like, did he get too far out ahead of the curve?
I see what you're saying, and possibly, but that's what makes him so intriguing, right? He's a guy that can be hit, but he's knocking people silly. He's got legitimate punching power in both his hands, right? And you can't say that about everybody. You know what I mean? Usually, most guys have either a right or a left. They don't. It's very rare that you see a guy who can knock you out with either hand, and he doesn't have to throw a Sunday punch to do it. You know what I mean? He can
Mhm.
probably stop most guys or knock them down with a jab. So I think that that's what makes him so intriguing, though, is because like if he got in there with the boots, it'd be a shootout for as long as it lasts. You know what I mean? Like that. That's basically what it would be.
Norman versus Taylor, just to give Norman more publicity. We talk about Josh Taylor, Jesus M. I ain't mad at that fight. Honestly, at this point in their careers, it kind of seems like Brian Norman would beat up Josh Taylor, but it'd be a good litmus test for him. Shushu Carrington did what Shushu Carrington does, right? Like we've kind of known he's right there for a little bit now. He's had some tougher fights with Sagawa, but Sagawa had beaten Ruben Villa. We know Sagawa is a real guy. For me, the most impressive young guy on this one in terms of improvement was Tiger Johnson, who we've always known has the hand speed, has the ability, has the footwork, but it's just been a little flat. And that we've had at least some inkling that the weight cut has been a part of that. He moves up to welterweight and completely dominates a guy who just went life and death with Kenny Sims. And I had what to me was probably the best performance of his career. But what did you think of, Tiger sort of turning the page at welterweight now?
I want to see him ascend quicker now, right? I want to see the real test because albeit against a good fighter, I've seen way too many moments of Tiger where I'm like, so you had a really good fight. Okay, let me see that again before I can really say, okay, yeah, you're on the track that we want to see you. Because, like you said, there's been a lot of question marks up until now, but consistency erases, the questions. So I needed consistent. But just speaking on this performance alone, I mean, there's nothing wrong you can say about what Tiger just did. It was perfect. So
He's just been a
yeah,
slower boil than the rest of the guys in his class, where it's like everyone that was in that COVID bubble era, if it's Jared Anderson, Troy Isley, Jahai, Abdullah Mason, they're all a little farther down the line. And we've been waiting for Tiger. It's felt like a lot of his fights have just been lateral moves. And this was the first one where I felt like, nope, he took a big step in the right direction. I like where it's going. But then you compare him to another welterweight prospect like a Rohan Polanco, who I'm real high on, and I feel like, he's a guy you could throw on with any top guy right now, and he's a handful. Whereas Tiger still feels like a work in progress, but it feels like he's moving in the right direction.
I think again, it's one of those things where if you just look at talent, right? On talent alone, Tiger Johnson is probably going to beat 99% of the other guys, again, just on talent alone. But it isn't just talent that wins these fights, right? So I think, the development, just like we were talking about Brian Norman, he might be ahead of his development. I think Tiger is behind his development, and maybe now they're starting to fuse together. They're getting a little bit closer. But again, I need to see it consistently. Like I've seen consistency, like we were just talking about Shushu. We kind of glanced over him, but it's because he's been so consistent, right? We've been getting this from Shushu. So the expectation is, yeah, you're obviously going to make that next step, right? I need to see that from Tiger before I can say I think he's ready to take the next step.
Shushu, I almost worry the opposite way, where I almost start to get worried that he's getting into that Arnold Barbosa territory, where it's like the next one, and then he's just been the next one for 4 or 5 fights now, and sometimes you worry that like a guy can get stale just waiting out the big fight.
Now he couldn't get out of the way of that right hand early, in this last fight against Vivi. So that worried me a little bit. Against a heavier puncher, he might have been in some trouble. But he does what Shushu does. He figured it out and got the guy out of there. But I think that worried me a little bit. Him not being able to get out of the way of the right hand. Like every time the boy threw with the right hand, it was landing and clean. So I'd like to see him, you know, tighten that up because again, once you do start stepping up against some of those bigger boys, in the game, that right hand and landing like that could be lights out.
Especially a Nick Ball and in a way any of the guys that he was calling out. That's the danger. Um, Give me your thoughts on William Zepeda's rematch win over Tevin Farmer. A pretty incredible fight where, man, Farmer really just like straight up took a beating for about 9 rounds and then found something very special in that last 3 rounds that not a lot of guys, would be able to recover that way. But Zepeda, again, like Mayer, getting a much, much more dominant, clear cut win in this one. Thoughts on this fight and this matchup and where Zepeda goes next?
I just feel bad for Devin Fry. It's like the dude can't catch a break, right? Apparently he was fighting through injury, um, again, right? And to me, that's as impressive as Cepeda's dominance was for a majority of the fight. To me, it's just as impressive as the fact that Tevin Farmer made it through the fight. Like, you know, um, the fact that he was in, from what I understand, he could have, and again, hats off to him for not pulling out. Like he could have said, nah, let me just take a knee or stop. This is what we talk about when we say fighters are built differently, right? I got hit really hard, so I'm just gonna quit. We all know who I'm talking about. I'm not gonna bring him back up and embarrass him even more. Tevin Tevin Farmer was dealing with a legitimate injury. He was getting beat up, and then he comes back and has some of the best rounds you know we've seen against a guy who has just been beating him up for like you said 7, 8, 9 rounds. Hats off to Tevin Farmer, bro. I think, but I think Zepeda, he's going to move on to something bigger from here. I'd like to see Tevin Farmer get another shot. I think that he's deserved it, in my opinion.
I thought, well, listen, I think Zepeda is a top 5 guy at this weight, and I know people are like looking for something more spectacular from him, or want something from him that they're not getting. I think he's a fucking handful. He throws a lot of punches. He hits very hard. He throws in combination. He's not awful defensively. He does keep his guard up on the way in, and I think he's a fucking problem. And I think it says a lot about Tevin that he could, at this point in his career, go 12 rounds with a guy like that.
It's hard to look good against Tevin Farmer too, bro. It's not.
So,
You
but
know what I'm saying?
that's one of the points I was going to make is like it felt like when Tevin was younger, he could be right in front of you and you couldn't catch him. And now he's a little less mobile and he just sort of gives you the body. And with a guy like Zepeda, you give him the body, he's like, all right, I'm going to take it. I'll throw a 9-punch uppercut combination to the body. And then Tevin's legs kind of came out of the equation until that last part of the fight where he manages this crazy second wind. But I think if Tevin is not as slippery as he once was, I worry about how much he's getting hit in these fights.
I think Tevin Farmer's heart alone keeps him in most fights, right? Like I said, there are a lot of other guys, right, who would have taken a knee or wouldn't have come out for round 7 or 8. You know what I'm saying? They would have just quit on their stool, or the corner would have thrown in a towel because they know their guy, right? I think that's again, so maybe to his detriment or to his, you know, to his credit, Tevin Farmer isn't a guy you throw in the towel against or for, right? Because he's going to give you what he just gave you, you know. And I think he's always going to be in a fight because he does have those skills. Like you said, he might not be as fleet-footed as he once was, but he can still give you problems without it. And again, I think if the injury weren't into play, not making excuses, all hats off to Zepeda, great win. And you're right. I think he is a top 5, maybe even top 4. Um, and I think that Tevin Farmer doesn't really lose much other than
He
another
doesn't lose
pointless record.
anything. I don't think he loses anything in terms of like his reputation or his legacy or anything like about that. What I'm concerned about is maybe he loses something physically, because when
Oh yeah,
we were watching him early
he's,
in his career, he didn't have physical fights like this. He was so slippery on the inside. He might take some body work, but he was never taking punishment. This was a punishing fight for him, and you got to wonder after whatever 15-year pro career, if having these kinds of fights right now, I don't know what he's going to have left after a fight like that.
I'd be okay with Tevin Farmer doing a victory tour or a victory lap, couple of fights, and then calling it a career. I'd be okay with that. I think he's earned it. Um, but I think it's a great notch on Zepeda's belt, right? That he got to do what he did against a Tevin Farmer twice. You know what I'm saying? Because and let's be clear, even though this was a clear cut win, this was still a hell of a fight, right? Like
Hell of a fight.
this was
A
a
fight of
hell
the
of a
year
fight.
candidate. Fight of the year candidate.
Right. Considering even though it was a clear cut victory, these were good rounds. This wasn't just a one sided, lopsided ass whooping. Yes, he won the rounds, but these were Tevin Farmer was still very competitive throughout the entire fight. This was a great fight to watch. If you love just back and forth action between boxers, this was great, and I think it's a great notch for Zepeda. That's again should be well deserved, and him getting a bigger payday.
There was another main event on this card that sort of opened up the card, and that was Yokasta Valle moving up to flyweight, 2 divisions to flyweight, and getting a decision over Marlon Esparza. There was a time not that long ago where Esparza was a pound for pound type of fighter in women's boxing. I don't know what's going on, but she's done a lot of missing weight in recent years. She hasn't been active, and she missed weight for this one. But it felt like in terms of the fight itself, she brought her A game, and Valle was just a little more talented, a little more fast, a little more dynamic, and despite really being like very visibly smaller, I felt like won this fight pretty clearly in impressive fashion.
I mean, look, I have Valle. We have Valle on our most recent women's pound for pound rankings,
She deserves
right?
it.
Well deserved, but Marla looked like a fighter who missed weight, right? Like she came in and I was like, was she backstage drinking beers and eating tacos? Like, what's
She
going
was
on, bro?
breathing hard, bro.
Yeah, like she looked like she came from the party. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But to her credit, her natural ability to fight is obvious, right? Like you can tell this girl has got something, and I don't know if she needs to get her team right or if she just I don't know if she's kind of in a bad space. Again, this is all speculative on my end, but I think if she tightens that ship back up and gets back into some really good shape. Marlon Esparza, I mean, she's got 3 losses, bro, and her 3 losses are legitimate losses. I think she can still bounce back. I mean, in the women's division, having 3 losses doesn't is not a career ending type of thing, right?
Yokovaya
So,
has 3 losses.
right. I mean, Amanda Serrano has losses, but no one's not going to show up to watch her, right? So I think, and Marlon is still in even in a losing effort, like you said, gave us a great fight. Like it
Yeah,
wasn't
I,
like
I I felt like she really showed up to fight. I felt like she really um fought a relatively smart fight. The difference in this one was just that Yokasta is more reliable. She's in better shape. She keeps a higher work rate going. She
she's
doesn't get
very accurate.
tired.
Yeah,
And with the accuracy is the hand speed and the 5-6 punch combinations. I just don't. Marlon couldn't match the intensity of the smaller fighter, and by the end of the fight, Valle was almost exclusively on the front foot.
sometimes, and I'm not saying this is the only reason she won this fight. I think Yokasta Valle is extremely talented, but sometimes being in really good shape, right, can be the difference between winning and losing a fight. If you're in if you're in much better shape than your opponent and can do things in those championship rounds that they can't do, you know what I mean? If you're still fighting like you did in the first 4 rounds and the last 3, that could be the difference between you winning and losing a fight, right? And I think Yokasta Valle is a champion of that, where you're going to get the same version of her in rounds 7, 8, 9, 10 that you got in 1, 2, and 3. And that's a problem for a lot of any boxer. I don't care what men or women, right? If you're the same fighter you were in the beginning as you are in the end, people are going to have a problem with that. You know what I mean? For the majority of your career, you can have a great career. So I think that on top of the fact that Yukas just so happens to be extremely talented, it's a huge problem, and I think Marla was just not able to overcome it. But given that, again, I still think you get Marla back in the gym with somebody right, get her tightened up, she could be a problem again. I think, and she proved it with even with this loss, she can be a problem going forward. But I think Yukasa just proved, hey, again, coming up being a smaller person, winning the fight the way she did, you know,
There's no doubt
hey,
for Marlon that the ability is still there. The question is, in your mid 30s, are you what you are, or can you make that change and in your discipline and in your patterns? That's just sort of the thing I worry about with Esparza. It's kind of always been her issue, at least for the last 3 or 4 years. And I just think people are really sleeping on. It's not easy, especially in those lower weights, to just randomly move up 2 weight classes to fight a top 3 fighter in your division. And Vaya was like, yeah, sure, no problem. I just love that desire, to make meaningful fights, make meaningful matchups, when this fight is more interesting than your mandatory. And she's going to go back down and she's going to defend that belt at minimum weight. I highly doubt anybody's beating her anytime soon, but I just felt like that deserved some credit.
at her natural weight class, she's heads and shoulders above everybody else, especially with the retirement. So I think um, with her being really the only superstar at that weight, I don't think there's. I think she had to do this just to get a test. If I'm being
No,
honest,
yeah, the only fight that I think will be an issue for her is if she fights Gabriela Fundora. And Fundora's had titles at 108, 112, but she's also, 5'9". There's going to be a massive natural size difference in that fight, but I don't know that either of them are going to find another opponent that talented. I think they'll wind up fighting each other at some point.
Gabriella is a whole nother that's that's a whole nother talent section. You know what I mean?
I agree with you, but who else is she going to fight that's anywhere near as good as Via? That's my point.
Right now, nobody.
That's what I'm saying.
Unless she move. And so here's the thing with Gabriella, and I think Valle proves it having to move up to get Esparza. I think Amanda Serrano is the champion of all champions when it comes to fighting in different weight classes, right? I mean, Jesus Christ, she's fought in, and how many? I think she's fought in damn near all the weight classes that aren't middleweight. You know what I mean? So she's fighting in all of them. But I think Gabriella is one of those. She's going to end up being or following that footprint that Amanda Serrano is kind of set out there, right? She's going to be one of those fighters that got to go up, 4 or 5 weight classes or fluctuate that weight. And I think she's got not only the talent but the camp and the ability to do so. But I think she's going to have to, play around in the weight classes to get the bigger belts and bigger challenges. But she's got the. I mean, I think she's got the talent to do it. I think Valle. I think she needs to kind of stay right around where she is. She because of her frame. She just doesn't have the frame to kind of go up and down. And she's not as big a puncher as she needs to be to get up with the bigger weight classes. But again, at her weight class, I mean, Jesus, bro, like she's pretty rough.
So, real quick, there was a lighter fight week, but I'm going to do a shameless plug before we start wrapping the show up. If it's not this week, it's the week after. The Fight Life with Shadeja Green episode 3 will finally be out. I'm really excited for you guys to see. I've been putting a lot of fucking time into this one, bub. Let me tell you, a lot of time, a lot of love. And I'm just looking forward to you guys seeing kind of the behind the scenes of what she's been through in the last year and a half. Losing the title opportunity, then coming back, getting a second opportunity, and seizing that moment. And what's next for her. She's one of the most dynamic champions in women's boxing right now, and it's really been a matter of her getting the matchups that are going to help to highlight that. But yeah, episode 3 coming within the next week or 2 weeks. That's a pinky promise. Did we talk about Sky over TR Brown? That was last week. I'm happy to touch on that real quick, though. I was a little surprised by that fight. There wasn't a lot to go on offensively, but it did feel like Tiara separated herself just enough, and some of that calculated nature of Sky Nicholson, she just wasn't offensive enough to separate herself in a lot of rounds.
Hats off to Tiara Brown, bro. I mean, literally came from being a police officer, and now she's a championship level fighter. Hats off to her. I think that again, I think she's got talent, but I think this was kind of similar to what you're saying. I think this was not the version of Sky that we were hoping to have seen. I don't know what was going on there. I don't know if there is a story there or if it was just there was if it was just Brown giving her those pauses. But I think a different version of Sky beats Tiara Brown. You know what I mean? But I think it was a good fight. Hats off to her. Congratulations, and I hope she can turn this into a bigger payday.
Nibs, as we always do, speak on the value of supporting local boxing.
So we just talked about it. You look at these TR Browns, and you look at the Shadeja Greens. I want to give a quote really quick, because we didn't touch on his passing. Recent former champion, wanted to go to the sport. I want to give you guys a quote from George Foreman, Big George Foreman. When asked about his fight with Michael Moore being rigged, he said, "Sure, the fight was fixed. I fixed it with my right hand." So, I want to say that even though George had all the backing after the Olympics and this, that, and the third, again, starts as a local guy. We talking about a guy who came up literally from nothing, went to the Olympics. He fought the biggest names in the sport, at the time and later on in his career.
Two different
He
eras.
right literally changed the way people cook steak. You know what I mean? I mean, quite literally took people who couldn't cook a steak to save their lives and made them, Chef Boyardee with his grills. And if it weren't for again the support from his local community, for years ago, we talking about a guy who started his career before all of us here were even an idea, right? Um, he got it out of the mud, literally. So with that support, he became who we a household name. Most people, a lot of people don't even know he was a boxer. They just know him because of his grills. But again, he became this huge household name. Why? Because people in his community believed in him, they supported him, and look where it took him. So, look, man, if you can take a guy who grew up in dirt roads and one room shack houses and make him one of the most recognizable names in the world off of boxing, why wouldn't you support that? So again, and again, I say this all the time. If you're supporting local boxing, you're supporting yourself. So why aren't you doing it? Let's get it.
That was beautiful, my friend. RIP to the great, the legend, George Foreman. We will see you guys next week. Appreciate everybody in the comments. Peace.